Hello, friends, and happy Thursday. I'll be hosting a hangout tonight at 8 p.m. if you are listening on June 4th. I hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. If you're a paid subscriber, you will be getting a link emailed to you. If you're not getting an email for any reason, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and I will get it done, taken care of somewhere or another. You are invited to hang out with us tonight at 8 p.m. It's always fun, rejuvenating, inspiring, funny, enlightening, and informative. So much more, and so I hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. Also, I should be live with the great Celeste Headley today around 10 a.m. East. You can thank our friend Tina Winsett for recommending I get her on this week. So we should be live on YouTube and Substack at Stand Up with Pete around 10 a.m. East today. Joining me on today's show, a legend for me, one of my favorite authors, a journalist and author now of 11 books, including the New York Times bestseller, Last Child in the Woods, which changed my life and the life of my family, especially my two amazing daughters. He's the co-founder of the Child and Nature Network. He is my friend. He is Richard Louv. He has a new book. It's called Noticing: Intimate Encounters with the Natural World, and you should go buy it. And the rest of his books, if you want to skip to my interview with Rich Louv right now, it begins at about 28 minutes in. But like every day, I've got your headlines. I've got your clip show. Let's get to it. Let's start with the fact that the House of Representatives voted to end the Iran war, is the short version. A little longer. 4 House Republicans sided with Democrats yesterday to direct General Fatton to halt U.S. engagement in Iran and require permission from Congress to continue operations in the Middle East. The vote, the New York Times writes, was a remarkable rebuke of Trump and his handling of the war. The adopted resolution, which now heads to the Senate, was the latest sign of divisions between the White House and Republicans on Capitol Hill. In a vote last month to move forward with a similar measure, a handful of GOP senators also broke ranks. But if the measure were to pass the upper chamber, the ability of Congress to force a president to withdraw troops remains a contested legal question. So I don't think that's going to make a big difference in the actual war funding or ongoings as it stands. Maybe I'm wrong, but getting that vote on the record is pretty important. And we can then interpret the contested legal question. And also in the Middle East, Iran fired a barrage of missiles and drones at Kuwait, killing a civilian, injuring dozens of others at the country's only international airport. Videos that the New York Times verified showed one of the airport's terminals ablaze as people ran for safety. Iran also launched missiles and drones at Bahrain, another U.S. ally in the Gulf region, saying it was targeting the headquarters of the U.S. Fifth Fleet. The attacks further inflamed tensions as negotiations to reopen the Strait of Hormuz have dragged on without a resolution. But the war is over. The war is over, you guys. I don't know if you knew. Lil Marco said it yesterday. He said the war's over. It's not. And neither is the war in Russia and Ukraine. Matter of fact, Ukrainian drones yesterday attacked St. Petersburg, Russia's second largest city, on the opening day of a major annual economic conference that Vladimir Putin has tried to cultivate into a showcase of modernity and prosperity in his country. It's like Davos, but in Russia. And now it's all, there's explosions all over and black smoke all over. And they targeted Ukrainian drones targeted for that reason. So pretty interesting development there a day or two after Russia's devastating attack on civilian apartment buildings in Ukraine. All right, let's come back to some domestic homeland headlines, including the fact that I guess this could affect everybody around the world, but Americans are going to face a new round of punishing price increases for fuel and other products as oil and gas inventories plunge to historic lows around the world because of the war in Iran. Energy executives and analysts are warning that fuel stocks are so low, they say, that even an abrupt agreement between the United States and Iran on immediate reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/5 of the world's oil and natural gas supplies passed before the war, may not stop fuel prices from soaring anew by the 4th of July holiday. So mark that down. That's what experts and analysts are saying. July 4th. Let's circle back and talk again to see if they're right, because there are different predictions on what these policies with tariffs and obviously the war and closing the Strait of Hormuz will do to the price of things, right? There have been different predictions based on a different set of circumstances. There's a lot of granularity and nuance that most of us probably don't understand, including me, but I don't know. It seems pretty straightforward how oil inventory works and is measured, unless countries are lying about what their inventories are, or companies. But very big development. And that sucks. It sucks for all of us to have to pay for high fuel prices, which make everything else cost more. It's way worse the less money you have, the more you and perhaps your family are struggling. But in the long run, the long game, nothing will hurt this regime more than high gas prices. So if I'm being honest, I think I'm rooting for them, because I don't know what else could knock this movement off the way it does. It also means I won't be driving anywhere this summer, but well, we'll see. We'll see how much that limits people's travel as well. That'll affect tourism dollars potentially. Certainly, there's been a lot of research that said a lot fewer people are coming to the United States. I think I saw a headline on that yesterday. All right, moving on. Elections have consequences in Hungary. They have signaled a bid to drop their longstanding opposition to Ukraine's bid for EU membership, allowing it and Moldova to begin formal negotiations to join the bloc in the coming days. That would be a pretty big deal. The ongoing fiasco at CBS News gets worse by the day, and I can't take my eyes off it. Yesterday, Scott Pelley responded to a response from CBS News. I highly recommend you read it all. And federal authorities are investigating whether former Representative disgraced George Santos engaged in insider trading by betting on a prediction market about whether he would show up at his A Holiness's State of the Union address in late February. I wonder if he'll get another pardon by his A Holiness. We'll see. And finally, I know you likely don't care about sports, much less the NBA, much less the New York Knicks, but they won Game 1 of the NBA Finals. I stayed up and watched it. It was exciting. It brought me joy, and a lot of my friends and neighbors as well here in New York. Okay, that's it. That's all I've got for your headlines. It's time to get to the clip show. All right, let's see. We had Marco Rubio up on Capitol Hill yesterday, and Representative Sarah Jacobs asked him an important question. Who won the 2020 election? He couldn't answer it. He said it was political. It's not. It's a litmus test question. It's a threshold question. It's one of a few questions where if you don't answer it clearly, succinctly, and accurately, you are not a serious person. And, well, here it is. And there's more than just that. Satisfying to hear Congresswoman Jacobs dress him down and make fun of him as well.
Mr. Secretary, who won the 2020 presidential election?
I'm not here to answer a question. We're talking about 2020. This is a foreign affairs committee.
Okay, great. You can't answer the question, even though we all know that President Biden won. I don't answer the question because the Secretary of State, I do not participate in domestic political issues. This is not about domestic political issues. This is about our democracy.
You're asking me to opine, just like I don't do campaign rallies.
It seems like
I don't do because as Secretary of State, we're not supposed to. That's been the long tradition of the department, and you should know that if you've been on this committee for any period of time.
Mr. Secretary, it seems like you have an issue admitting facts. You can't say that the president lost the 2020 election, just like you won't admit President Trump is losing this reckless war of choice, and just like you couldn't admit that the shoes the president bought you were too big. You clearly don't know what winning means, and not because the facts are unclear to you, it's because telling the truth would cost you your job, and the American people are entitled to a Secretary of State who tells them the truth even when the president doesn't want to hear it, and my constituents, our service members, deserve better. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I don't know what shoes she's talking about. What is she talking about?
I don't know. Representative Burchett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you'd like to answer any of that.
Yeah, I don't know about the shoes. I mean, he gave me some Florsheim shoes. They're actually pretty good. They fit fine. I don't know what she's talking about. And maybe that's what she's referring to.
Your shoes look very nice today, Mr. Secretary.
Well, how can you see them? They're way down here. We're talking about shoes. Are you guys kidding me? I mean, is this the Foreign Affairs Committee or is this like a circus? What is this?
I think it's a circus. And
yeah, it is the circus. Who do you think made it the circus? Who do you think, Marco? All right. Do you know who Ashley St. Clair is? She's this former right-wing kind of influencer, author, political commentator. She's also one of Elon Musk's baby's mothers. They have a child together back in just a couple of years ago, 2024 apparently. Well, she was for a long time an outspoken proponent of conservative and anti-transgender politics. But she's denounced her previous anti-trans activism, and who knows how authentic or how real it is, but it's still satisfying to hear her talk this way.
And like, that is what also broken. They have no sense of identity and they're all coping in different ways. And like, that is what really started to bug me about the trans issue, is that they're like making fun of these people and saying this disadvantaged community who's like less than 1% of the population, and like, oh, they don't have a sense of identity. None of those people do. Like, What are you talking about? You have no sense of self. Your entire sense of self is MAGA and like dick sucking Trump. And so that, to me, I was like, this is just so cruel, and they were doing it just to be cruel and to punch down. And I have like a little bit of a mean girl streak, but I like to punch up, you know, but they convince you that it's part of a larger movement, and it's like trans Antifa, and it's like this big bad boogeyman. And then when you actually, you know, take the time to do the work, you're like, this is a non-issue. Like, they are hyper-fixating on non-issues here. I can assure you, you're not unsafe and you can't not afford groceries because trans people and immigrants. It's because you're president and the capitalist class is fucking you.
Ooh, I was here for that one. Yeah, I liked it. So I shared it with you. Hopefully you liked it too. All right, let me move on to, this is Congressman Jason Crow again, just after the vote in the House against the Iran war resolution. And this is what former combat veteran Jason Crow, Democrat, had to say.
I just walked off the House floor and we did it. We passed a war powers resolution, forcing a vote on the floor for people to take a up or down on this reckless Iran war. And Democrats, with the help of a handful of Republicans, got this bill over the line. So now we got to try to force the Senate to take it up and vote on it now, because the American people deserve a vote on this war. Americans need to be in the driver's seat when we're making decisions on war and peace, whether to send our sons and daughters to fight overseas, whether to send our billions of dollars of taxpayer dollars overseas. This is the way that democracy should work.
All right. There you go, Jason Crow. Hey, you're probably paying attention, a little bit attention to all the Senate races around the country. You know what's going on there in Michigan with their Democratic primary? They have 3 candidates. There's so much talk about Israel and AIPAC and the Middle East, because there's a huge population of both Jewish people in Michigan and I think the highest population of Arab Americans in Michigan as well. And if you know anybody or know anything about Detroit, Dearborn, anything, you would know that. And so that's partially why Dr. Abdul Saeed is from there. But it's also, the guy's a doctor and he's a Senate candidate. And I haven't seen that much of him, and I'm more familiar with Mallory McMorrow, who is running, who I've interviewed several times. But man, I just thought that this moment, this back and forth that he had with Katie Tur on MS News Now, whatever the hell it's called yesterday, was very, very good. And so I wanted to share it, and you can decide what you think.
Jewish population in Michigan, and a lot of them, you know, feel uncomfortable in this moment about anti-Semitism, about the way that campaigns sometimes speak about what is anti-Semitism and what is not. What do you say to the Jewish community who you're going to want to vote for you about your positions on Israel, on AIPAC funding, et cetera, and how they shouldn't feel alienated by a candidate like you?
Well, Katie, I'll tell you this. Nobody understands what it's like to be discriminated against for how you pray, like someone who gets discriminated against for how we pray. And most of the time, we don't ask how we pray. Most people are asking, what do you pray for? And I pray for peace and dignity and basic goodness for all of our kids, whether they're Jewish kids who are neighboring a couple of houses down from me or my kids who are Muslim. And I'll tell you that it's really important for us to be able to differentiate between Judaism, the Jewish people, Jewish culture, Jewish contributions to this country, which are vast, and AIPAC and Israel. Those are 2 different things. When I'm elected, will be the chief opposition to what the Egyptian government does. Now, my family immigrated from Egypt. That doesn't make me anti-Egyptian. That just means that I want my tax dollars to be spent here rather than sent over there to cement the chokehold of a military dictatorship on its own people. And I apply the same exact principles to Israel. I don't want my tax dollars being spent to backstop apartheid and genocide when they could be used to provide things like glasses or healthcare or schools for our own kids. And I worry that a lot of times people want to use the word anti-Semitism to spread to defend a foreign government. And I think it's just really important for us to differentiate between those two, because I don't want to be held accountable to what another government does simply because I share ethnicity with the people who live there. And I know the same for my Jewish sisters and brothers.
You've got support of Bernie Sanders and a lot of other progressives in the caucus. They're more
my favorite Jewish uncle.
There are more moderates in the Democratic Party who are worried that if primary voters elect you in Michigan, they're going to lose that seat. I guess, how will you feel if you are elected, the general election happens, and it goes to Mike Rogers?
Well, we're going to do everything we can to beat Mike Rogers. I'll just tell you this. Who better to take on a guy who voted 60 times to raise prescription drug prices and then helped to architect the legislation that kicked off the opioid epidemic and then took a $14 million payout to be a pharma lobbyist than a guy who's a doctor who rebuilt the health department in the city of Detroit, eliminated $700 million of medical debt, and put Narcan in 100 locations? There is nobody better to prosecute that case than I will. So we're going to beat him by 7. We're going to beat him up and down the state, and we're going to show them what it looks like to actually campaign on strength.
That clip cut off right there. Strength rather than weakness? Not positive that's what he said there, but that was a great answer. Sorry it cut off. And anyone in Michigan that is decided who they're voting for, I'd love to know. We'll put Maddie C on the spot at tonight's hangout. And anybody at Michigan Jim, are you coming? Going to join us? Love to know what you guys think about that Senate race there. Here is Senator Maggie Hassan. Yesterday in a Senate hearing, she had the Secretary of Treasury, the unbearable, arrogant, awful bootlicker, sycophant, and childish Scott Bessent. Or is it Bessant? Don't care. Listen to this.
Secretary Bessent, in May, the president said that he does not think about Americans' financial situations. Do you think about the financial situation of the American people?
I do, and as the ranking member distorted my statement, as he often does, I had prefaced my statement with, we understand that these are challenging times for the American people, that we will get over this, and that at present, the average household has paid about $200 more in gasoline.
Well,
we think about this every day.
Well, I'm glad that you do. Do you think your boss should too?
I believe his remarks were taken out of context.
Here's what he said. He said, quote, I don't think about Americans' financial situation. I don't think about anybody. So I'm asking you, that's the direct quote, do you think about how the American people are paying more for gas, groceries, and utilities, since the president clearly said he didn't? And you speak with the president regularly. Are you trying to tell him the truth about how much costs have increased for the American people?
Well, Senator, I'm going to have to disagree with you on some of that, because I have groceries are going down. And to be clear, since President Trump took office, food prices, or as many people like to call them, groceries, food at home in the statistical data, is up 2.5%.
When's the last time you were in a grocery store? Because my husband and I were just in one. And look, the average Granite Stater has paid, let me be clear, the average Granite Stater has paid $3,000 more since Donald Trump took office for basic goods and services. Meanwhile, the country lost 100,000 manufacturing jobs in 2025. So do you tell the president this information or not?
Again, Senator, except for inflation, which is, I believe, going to be a short-term blip, the economic data is very strong. The jobs data has been very strong. The manufacturing ISM has been very strong.
No, that's incorrect. So let's move on, because what's clear to me...
Which part was incorrect, Senator?
No, what is very clear to me is that neither you nor the president nor this administration are willing to acknowledge how much more people are paying at the gas pump, at the grocery store, in utilities, for health care, for all aspects of American life, nor have you acknowledged the number of manufacturing jobs that were lost in 2025.
Listen to all the sounds he's making to try to get in. What did I say that wasn't right? Everything you said, everybody knows that everything is going up. What is going down? No prices are going down anywhere on anything. Ridiculous. The trade war and the Iran war are causing prices to skyrocket everywhere on everything. That guy is such a piece of shit. Oh, do I not like him? Okay, moving on. Let's get to another clip of him with Sheldon Whitehouse.
I'm unable to discuss most of this because of ongoing litigation.
Yeah, I know you like to say that.
I'm unable to comment because of litigation. Again, there's ongoing litigation. I'm not going to be able to comment on these matters.
But the constitutional...
We like to follow the law, Senator.
And the law is that Congress has constitutional oversight functions that do not disappear simply because there is litigation, however convenient it may be. If this kind of behavior is okay with the chairman, I'll just pursue other questions. But, what goes around comes around in terms of dodging questions.
I believe it's very clear that witnesses of any kind cannot discuss ongoing litigation.
They can certainly discuss a fact that they are aware of. Was there a defense analysis memo prepared by the IRS? And more specifically, did you see it?
Again, I'm not going to be able to comment on these matters.
Mr. Chairman, this just makes no sense at all. I've been a lawyer all my life. I have some idea of what is protected, whether this individual has seen an official memo from within his own department is a very simple question to answer. And I think it's completely inappropriate to have this game of dodgem be pursued without any consequences.
Oh, forgive me. I should have mentioned that there was edits there. Did you hear the little at the top there, or the whoom, or whatever? I can't do it. I'm sorry, but it was edited and I should have said it, but I said it after. So you've not been duped. Clearly you could hear how many times he'd used that dumb answer that is not applicable in this case. Sheldon Whitehouse was incredulous. It was really funny to watch his face on that one, if it wasn't so damn sad. Speaking of sad, here's Senator Bill Cassidy on the Senate floor pounding his fist. He, of course, is the Republican senator who did more than anybody to make sure RFK was our Health and Human Services Secretary. And also, he has been trying to get back in Trump's good graces forever. I believe he was one of the votes for impeachment. Do I have that right? Or he was critical of him at some point back in 2020. Anyway, here it is, Bill Cassidy having a tantrum, and it just sounds so cucky.
Mr. President Trump, get engaged. Mr. President, too many people have this debt, $10,000 on their credit card related to paying in part for things such as medical expenses, and they are going down.
I mean, first he opened with Mr. President Trump. Who the hell says it that way? Such a cuck. The cuckest. The cuckiest? Okay. What else? What's this? Oh, this is a fun rant from the great progressive commentator, Jennifer Welch.
Person who has Barry Weiss is a very unserious person who has a very serious job. And Nick Bilton, you chose to go work for these fascists. And now you are a fascist collaborator. We stand with Scott Pelley 100%. And everyday Americans look to his courage and his strength and do not fall for this jet stream of bullshit letter by Nick Bilton, sanctimoniously lecturing Americans about journalism when he goes to work for the network CBS that is committing suicide every single day. And here is our job: boycott every fucking thing on CBS News from the morning all the way through to the evening. These are the same people that fired Stephen Colbert because Trump got his feelings hurt by a comedian. These people are the biggest bunch of pussies that masquerade with these grandstanding letters like they're such badasses. These people don't care about the truth. They don't care about journalism. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about a free press. It's just absolutely devastating what these oligarchs have done to our country. And then you get these people that go and join them. But Scott Pelley showed us the way by standing up and fighting these people tooth and nail.
Tooth and nail. Yeah, I don't like that phrase, tooth and nail. That elicits an uncomfortable image. I feel like you're biting down in a nail. Sorry for describing it. All right, let's wrap it up with some comedy, shall we? Let's head over to Late Night with Seth Meyers.
President Trump dismissed the reported collapse of peace talks with Iran in a post yesterday on Truth Social and said, quote, "The conversations between us have been going on continuously, including 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 1 day ago, and today. So for the past 5 days, maybe the talks are taking so long because you describe every single thought using the most words possible. In a new podcast interview, President Trump confirmed that he called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu crazy during a phone call this week, but added they have, quote, worked very well together. Oh, yeah, if you have any skills at all, working with crazy is right up there. That's right. President Trump confirmed that he called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, quote, crazy, before adding, now, if you'll excuse me, I have to finish building a UFC arena on the White House lawn. While testifying yesterday before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the war with Iran, quote, is over, which explains why Trump was seen grabbing and kissing nurses in Times Square. Pennsylvania man was arrested last week after he allegedly tried to destroy his own home with an excavator after an argument with his wife. Man, what kind of psycho destroys his own home with an excavator? Oh, right. Sorry. Totally forgot. President Trump posted an image yesterday on Truth Social of himself next to a mirror with the caption, quote, Trump 007. I don't know. I think he's more of a Bond villain. You know, I think he's old finger. Like, not even close, my favorite joke in the monologue. Has it done as well with you as I hoped? Absolutely not. Is it still my favorite joke in the monologue? It is. Top Russian officials have reportedly told President Vladimir Putin that the country can no longer afford to pay for the Ukraine war. Unfortunately, for those officials, pushing a guy off a balcony is still free. I never liked that one. My whole finger I loved. You bullied me into that one. The Trump administration said this week that it will reduce tariffs on agricultural equipment. At least I assume that's what he meant by bringing in cheap hose. I would say we are now massively off track. Disgraced former Congressman George Santos is reportedly being investigated for insider trading on the prediction market Kalshi after betting, yes, George Santos will be investigated for insider trading. According to new research, Neanderthals used stone drills to treat cavities. Even crazier, they figured out veneers. The first half of this monologue did feel like a monologue. And then it's been something else for a while. Oh, God, and I forgot what the last joke was. Mike Scollins wrote the last joke, and he's sitting right over there. So when this is over, I'm going to make eye contact with him. And finally, today was Insect Repellent Awareness Day. Hope you got off. Yeah, that was actually pretty good. It was actually pretty good. That was a monologue, everybody.
Seth Meyers, I liked it. I like that he was not getting the responses that he necessarily thought he deserved on those jokes. I always love those moments. He's a real likable, funny guy. There you go. That is the comedy. Now it's time to get to my guest. He is one of my all-time favorite writers, specifically and especially writers of nature. And he is won all the awards and all of the honors. You should get all of his books, especially Last Child in the Woods, which I've always got several copies around. I've got to order some more because I give them away as gifts to new parents or expecting parents. I think it's the best gift you can give. Well, a book, but specifically this one. I'm very biased. Last Child in the Woods is that book. And his new book is called Noticing Intimate Encounters with the Natural World. It's so very good. He is beloved by me and so many others. I was very happy and honored to get to sit down with him. And I think I'm going to go visit and spend some time with him and his family in the mountains at some point. So looking forward to that. Anyway, here it is. I hope you like it. Let's do it with Rich Louv. And there he is. The new book is out, and I am so excited to talk to a man who is so important to me, especially his work, Noticing Intimate Encounters with the Natural World. the new book. Congratulations, sir, and welcome back to my show. It is so good to see and talk to you.
It's always great to see you, Pete.
You started your career as a journalist and then a columnist, and you did that for decades. Just in case people don't know about that part of your life, I feel like in many ways you've applied that and combined it with your great writing to talk about nature. And in this book, I feel like you do a lot of journalism in who you talk to and introduce us to. Talk about the role that journalism plays in this and all of your work.
You know, in the beginning of the book, in the introduction, I talk about how I decided to do this book. And it's based on journalism, on my prior experiences. About 7 years ago, my wife, Kathy, and I moved to the mountains east of San Diego because I have nature deficit disorder and needed more nature in our lives. But one morning I was walking on a road near here, and this is a little bit wild here. There are mountain lions in our yard. And I was walking, and I was thinking about how much I missed my fellow journalists. Journalists, and this isn't popular these days among some people to say, but journalists, to my mind, are the smartest and most irreverent people. And that's a good combination for me. And I was thinking about them and how I miss them because I've been out of newspapers for quite a while. And I thought one of the things I love about them is that they notice that, you know, they walk into a room and to interview a politician, and they look around, they see what's on the wall, they see the pen in the politician's pocket, and they notice and they bring back all of these details and then make a story about that politician. And I realized when I was doing that I was still doing it. I noticed the turkeys crossing the road, the wild turkeys. I noticed tracks in the mud along the road. I noticed details in the trees. I noticed things I didn't necessarily notice, didn't necessarily see, but I felt in the forest around me. So I thought, well, this is good news. I'm still noticing. And that's how the book started.
Yeah, it is. And it also started time-wise around COVID, as we all got to experience more nature. And I think a lot of people discovered maybe for the first time or rediscovered how important it was in their life. And that's around the timing of the book. But just one question about what you said, because I guess there is a debate or an ethical question about that nature writers or experts have, maybe native people have, that you shouldn't overanalyze nature, which I guess I didn't really realize. I thought you were supposed to overanalyze nature, and that was kind of what it was about. But tell me a little bit about why some people think that's something you shouldn't do, and how, in a way, you're arguing that it's impossible to overanalyze nature, I feel like. Am I even doing any justice to the kind of discussion or debate around noticing, in this case?
Oh, sure. And that's actually the way that the introduction starts, where I go up the mountain that is in front of our house, Vulcan Mountain, with a friend, and we operate a trail camera up there. It's a conservation program. We operate that. We find mountain lions on the film and we bring it back, or on the digital chip, and all kinds of other life. And we were talking about this one time and sitting on stumps in the woods. And she said she always feared that she was overanalyzing her life and the life around her and intellectualizing everything. And I asked her if she ever felt that she was missing something, even with all that analysis. And she stopped and she's looking at the ground in front of her, and it's covered by purple mushrooms. And she said, sometimes I feel that I'm missing a lot. I'm missing life. Even with all the words that we use, even with all the analysis and science we use, there's something we're missing. And that's beyond the veil. That's all around us.
I'm going to read just from the beginning. This is at the introduction of the book, because it's, I think, a great way of describing how you wrote this book and who we'll get to meet. You write, you'll meet a nature therapist who helps people discover their hidden or lost selves in a mountain forest. a man who for years has driven 60 miles weekly to plant pine seedlings on the same mountain, which has been scraped bare by wildfire 3 times, and a young indigenous video artist whose work draws from these mountains and her ancestors. Also, a Tibetan Buddhist lama and a neighbor who teaches me about interbeing. A woman who survived violent abuse, became a paratrooper, and hopes to remake her life by helping other women remake theirs. A tribal council member protecting ceremonial land, a retired fire chief who confronts wildfire with a garden hose and luck, and a nearby neighbor who, while fighting in the swamps of Vietnam, picked up a wounded egret and carried it into the future. Casting a net beyond this region, I've interviewed artists, teachers, botanists, and other biologists, writers, ranchers, photographers, conservationists, religious leaders, a visiting expert on the, quote, loneliness of trees, and many others. And then if you see where I'm at, if you don't mind picking up to describe what the term deep noticing means.
Okay. The term deep noticing does not represent a new concept. It has been practiced and taught in various forms by different names for thousands of years across cultures. Now a new surge of research suggests the existence of a deeper, more mysterious network of life on Earth. Humans possess far more senses to perceive this network than Western society has generally acknowledged. Drawing on ancient wisdom and modern science, we're rediscovering that the forest is enchanted and that we can become bio-enchanted. It's a word that kind of sums up what I've noticed. Early in the process of doing the book, I went up the same mountain that is in front of us with a nature therapist who takes groups up to do forest therapy. Forest bathing is what it's usually called. And this method began in Japan and now it's spread. And there was a group of women and me, about 5 or 6 women, and she would send us on assignments. Go find a tree and sit under it for a while and come back and tell me what you learned. You know, they were more complex than that, but it was a series of this. So we would go out and then she would blow on a flute and we would all come back to the circle and sit and describe what we've seen. As people described what they were learning and what they perceived, I thought this sounds familiar. The format of the stories, I've heard these before. And I wondered, where did fairy tales come from? And I think the forest is enchanted. What people were bringing back was what they noticed with 30 senses. Human beings the people who study the human senses no longer talk about 5 senses. They talk about a minimum of about 9, and some talk about as many as 30 or even 100 human senses. And then it gets really complex because we use these senses, some of them at the same time, and that produces different impressions of reality and what's beyond reality. Some people feel pain in color. So we're more complex in the way that we take in the world than we think we are. And my feeling is that when we go out in the forest or a desert, that we're picking up a lot of information. Our senses, our full use of the senses, many of which we don't know we have. We're picking up things that are so complex. And it's nature. I think for millions of years, human beings have done this, or hundreds of thousands of years. We've gone out and we've sensed there's something more in nature. And now science is entering this. In the last 15 years, a lot of new research, in addition to the explosion of research that's happened in the last 20, about how important nature experience is to our health, our mental health, cognitive health, physical health. There's a couple other bodies of evidence, of science, that are just mushrooms. One of them is about our senses. The other one is about how much civilization there is beneath our feet. Microscopic animals and plants that go deep within the earth that form patterns. And there's some thought that some of these microscopic animals actually recreate the earth again and again and again. But also around us, the conversation, the great conversation around us, birds talking within their own species, but also across species, squirrels mimicking the sound that birds make, the alarm sounds, when they're alarmed, and they listen to each other. I've been calling this for a long time the great conversation. When people were isolated during COVID, they began to look out their windows, and I received a lot of emails from parents and others.
Sure.
Who said they began to look out the window and they noticed there were birds in the tree outside the window for the first time. They noticed that there was life out there. Now, obviously, they'd noticed it before, but not at this depth. And the importance of that, they realized, because it made them feel less alone. And the epidemic of human loneliness, which has been written about a lot, and I've written about it a lot, we are lonely as a species. It's called species loneliness, and this precedes the current events. This is part of our genetics. This is part of who we are. We hunger to feel that there is other life in the universe. And this has religious implications, of course, but the truth is we're not alone. We're surrounded by that great conversation. And when we listen to it, when we notice it, we do not feel so alone.
Wow, so perfectly said. I didn't tell you could stop reading, though. Could you go to the end there? You missed talking to me. I can tell you missed talking to me. Page 7, at least on my copy, where it is, just give us the good but fragile news. That's what you wrote. Here is good but fragile news.
Here is good but fragile news. Counterintuitively, even as we mourn the destruction of so many species, lands, and waters, the natural world offers us an antidote to our growing despair. We can find relief right there in our peripheral vision, in a deep and wavering current, followed by native trout, in a line of swifts living most of their lives in flight, in the tracks of the mountain lion, along a worn path, a path of wonderment.
I love it. I love that so much. That's the end of the introduction, the path of wonderment, and then we dive into the book and are introduced to so many people through your experiences, some that you spent time with, some that you called, some that you knew, some that you didn't, obviously. And I just love so much of it. And let me come back to it because I want to make sure that I talk about your seminal book. Is it called, did we call it your seminal book? That the internet calls it a seminal book. You've written 10 books. And
11, actually, now.
Forgive me and pardon me, sir. All of them are I own all of them. But Last Child in the Woods is the one, and Vitamin N, which of course listeners, subscribers of mine know I include every single day, and I've always given credit to you, even though others have used it. I was introduced it through your book, Vitamin N. But Last Child in the Woods, I have several copies, and I just ran out. I had ordered 10 copies, and I give them as a gift to new parents or parents with young children that I might just meet. And what I want to say is to you, to your face, and so everybody hears it, my daughters are 18 and 21. I'm about to be empty nest. You know the feeling. And I feel like I am entitled to a pretty good opinion on my parenting and my daughters. And I do think that of all of the books I read, your book, Last Child in the Woods, impacted my parenting more than any other book I read about parenting. And I think that the things that I learned from the book and the practices I developed and the behaviors that I tried to role model and the choices I made a huge impact on my daughters being the women that they are. And I'll just describe them with 3 words: confident, independent, and secure. And I think a lot of that has to do with their connection to nature and what I learned about so much of children from Last Child in the Woods. And what I want to ask you is, do you hear that a lot from parents about how impactful that book was on their parenting after the parenting, the tough part or the day-to-day part is over?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I can't tell you how gratifying that is.
I can't imagine.
Although I just didn't. I hear that from teachers too.
Great.
And pediatricians who are now prescribing nature.
So more specifically, without, I don't want you to be modest. This is for parents listening and for anybody because like I said, you should get this book for friends. It's a great gift for people with little kids or newborn, whatever. What specifically do people say about that book or any of your work that they draw from as parents? Give me a few if you want.
I think what they say is summed up with the title of the current book. They go outside and they notice the world with their kids. And their kids go out by themselves and they notice nature. They notice the world in a deeper way than they might have otherwise.
When you send your child into the woods alone or with other children without a parent and they come back without dying, it's almost always the case. Almost always. Or being injured or bitten by a tick. And they do that over and over again. They develop a kind of independence, a lack of codependence, and confidence that they can do things, that they can have experiences without an adult. It creates confidence. I mean, I'm sure there is science now that can study the connection between going out into nature and coming back alive, knowing you navigated it, and maybe, just maybe, probably you did some noticing. Is that right?
Yeah. And when I wrote Last Child, which was published in 2005, I could only find about 60 studies in the world, and I had a couple of good academics that were helping me look, about the benefits to health and well-being, physical, mental, cognitive, emotional. In the world, only about 60 studies had been done at that point, that at least I could find with their help. I was astonished at that. How could something so fundamental, so basic to who we are, have been ignored, virtually ignored by academia compared to so many other things that have thousands of studies about them? Since then, in the last 2 decades, there's been an explosion of research. It's now a growth industry on the effect of nature experience, not only on children, but on adults. And now you can go to the Children in Nature Network, which is the nonprofit that grew out of Last Child, to the website, which is childrenandnature.org. And there's a library there, a research library that has over 1,500 abstracts of studies. So it's gone from about 60 to 1,500 in 2 decades, and it's still growing. Apparently, the estimate is there's probably about 1,700 studies now. And they all point in the same direction, that this is fundamental. This is our experiences in nature are not a nice to have. They're a have to have. I mean, for many kids, this is life-saving. This is not only of their body, but of their soul, in a sense, to have this connection to nature.
I'm glad you mentioned Children in Nature Network. I was about to ask you about it, because when you think about your body of work and how gratifying it must be, obviously your books are your babies. You put your heart and soul into your journalism, your career, obviously your family and what it means to you. But you co-founded or created this Children in Nature organization, which has been doing amazing work for years now. I've worked with the organization as a result of being introduced to them by you. I've known board members in the past. They're still doing such good work. Talk about, though, why children and nature, because I talk about this all the time just from the standpoint of saying no matter what issue you really care about, the most important thing you can do to make an impact on that issue is to teach children. Some might say indoctrinating. Fine. Indoctrinating them into having a connection with nature is fine by me, no matter what it is. But why is it so important to connect children with nature, especially those who aren't growing up around it a lot? Or say anything you want about this amazing organization and the work they do.
Children in Nature Network works on a personal level with parents and others who go to the website, who come to the conferences to learn how they can better connect their kids and themselves, which is very important.
Yeah, whole communities, schools, organizations. Obviously, I'm just adding to who they work with. Yeah.
Yeah. But in recent years, Children Nature Network has also focused on systems, on systems of government, systems of education, and to try to change those whole systems to move in this direction. For instance, they've been working with the National League of Cities, which represents about 18,000 mayors and other urban leaders in the country, to try to look at their own cities and consider what they might be like if they were more nature-rich. What would the health of those people in those cities be like? What would productivity of the businesses in those cities be like if there was greater wealth of nature in those cities? And the studies point to that again and again, to higher productivity in buildings that are built with biophilic architecture and design, with nature around them, but nature within them too. Sick time goes down, absenteeism goes down, creativity goes up. What if whole cities could be like that? And they can be.
Yes, they can.
So it works on a very personal level. That's very important. We can't forget that. But it also works on this systemic level. This issue does.
Let me ask you let's get back to the book. It's called Noticing Intimate Encounters with the Natural World, talking to the great author Richard Louv, of course. Go check out Children of Nature, by the way, please. And consider a donation. Consider becoming a member. It's an organization I've worked with for years. I highly endorse them and their work. I think it's vital, and I think Rich just made the case. You write in your book, your new book, Noticing, to notice or not to notice is a choice, and the choice depends on context. And then you write about the late Jane Goodall, who I think you knew, changed the way we view the world. What do you want to say about that choice that we make? Because it doesn't only obviously apply to noticing nature, but it matters a lot out there.
Well, Jane Goodall broke the mold by noticing. When she went to Africa to study the animals there and the wildlife, she did something that was different. So much of science is very narrowly focused on one issue, one animal, one process. Jane sat on top of a hill with binoculars for weeks and weeks and weeks and months and just noticed. And I think that the kinds of things that she learned were a little different than science often. Then she went deeper into gorillas and chimpanzees and learned that chimpanzees practice war and that there's a lot. She began that by having a broad view of nature. And the people who study attention sometimes talk about a kind of attention that is two kinds of attention. One focuses very tightly, for instance, on a leaf. Another kind of attention pulls far back and looks at the forest. And that's a kind of attention that has been studied recently, and they find that kids who practice that kind of attention, of immersion in nature, do much better on tests, and they remember everything far more than one would think. And that so much of science is close attention to one thing. Now, this gets complicated because you can also have this kind of wide attention by looking at one thing.
Sure.
And it takes many pages in the book to describe this because it's not easy to describe.
Worth bringing up. But let me just say, if people obviously just illustrating that with my own experiences, when I'm alone in nature, in the woods, which I am all the time, more rarely on the beach, if I'm alone, I stop and I'll observe something. You do that even more when you're a kid, but you should do that as an adult, and you should do that throughout your life, I think. I'm sorry for shooting you. But when I'm walking, as I do every Wednesday with Zatz, regular listeners know my friend Ken Zatz. At least they don't know him. I talk about him all the time. We go in the woods every Wednesday, and one of us inevitably points several times just to a thing, whether it's a stump that's been destroyed by whatever species or just a mushroom, whatever. We don't necessarily talk about it, but we'll just stop and we'll look at it. And the rest of the time we're looking up at the forest, doing exactly what you just described with every experience, looking down closely at one thing, animal dropping a track, any number of things. And of course we stop and eat tons of berries. And he just told me on the last trail that there are some people who say we shouldn't be eating those berries because that we should be letting the deer especially eat them. And I say, fuck them. They got enough. They eat my flowers. They eat everything. They eat everything is how I feel. You may feel differently. The point was just to illustrate what you're talking about the more macro and micro, and I really did an injustice because you describe it more in depth in the book. Let me ask you to describe whoever. Sometimes an interviewer will ask you specifically, and they'll set up and talk about one of the people in this case that you met and learned from. I'd rather ask you who you want to talk about, who's easiest to talk about, rather than put you in the spot to have to remember this this person and this chapter and everything they said. So give us any example you want from the book of who you spoke to, spent time with, and what, if anything, you learned from them. And teach us.
Well, let me return to something you were saying about this close focus and wide focus.
Yeah.
William Blake, born in the 1700s, one of the great poets in human history, talked about two ways of seeing that he later expanded to four, but he talked primarily about two ways of seeing. And the first way was the close way. He talked about seeing a tree by seeing the leaves, seeing very closely. And I can't remember what he called that. But then he said the second way of seeing is to pull back from the tree and see the tree in its context.
Yeah.
As a system, how that tree works with other trees. And this is one of the things that has been learned, and I'm sure you know this, is that trees are connected by mycelium, by a fungus that laces through entire forests. And the trees communicate through that. It's kind of a natural internet. And we didn't know that until recently. But then he says, pull back and see that as the system, the context. And then he said, you should pull back beyond that to see until the forest itself blends into something so large that you can't describe it. And he calls that the divine.
I call it that too, or something exactly that means the same thing, I think. Perfectly said. I just lost my place, but you write about how nature changes and humanity changes, and certainly so much has changed with technology. How are we to look at this? I think it's important that you talk about how it's always changing. I think that's what you wrote, something about it's always been changing. Our relationship, our ability, level of noticing, and I would argue and add our exploitation of all of it, just drilling everywhere we can and taking and sucking out as much of nature's life and energy as we can for any number of purposes. How are you feeling, and what did you learn about this time that we are living in, which seems like it's exponentially, it's changing at a rate that life has never changed, but maybe that's just our perspective.
I'll talk about two experiences, one that I had and then another person I went up the mountain with. When I was asked to participate in a conference that was being held by an Eastern university on the metaverse. And the question that they asked me was, can the metaverse connect us to nature? And so I was on Zoom, and I was watching the people on the stage talk to a live audience. And these were people who were working with computers and working with virtual reality and artificial intelligence and all of that. And the metaverse, with creating things that kind of look like nature. You could experience trees as an avatar of trees, but they were all doing this on their screens. And I got impatient listening to that. And then they turned to me. And they said, well, Mr. Louv, what do you think? Can we connect with nature through computers and all that? Is that a good way? And I said, I don't think so. And at that very moment, the camera pulled back, and I realized that entire time I had been on camera behind the people on the stage who were talking. Big image of my face doing this and rolling my eyes. I'm an Olympic level eye roller, and just so frustrated listening to this. So they'd seen all of that. So I said, "Oh, busted."
What did they think you were going to? What did they think you were going to say?
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't dismiss technology. We're doing it right here. I like Zoom. It means I don't have to get on an airplane sometimes. Right. And there's a phrase in the Nature Principle, which is one of the 5 books now I've done on nature, which is the more high-tech our lives become, the more nature we need. It's going to become more technological. But that just means that we have to up the ante in terms of how much nature we're exposed to. After that online conference, I described how I felt like an avatar of myself. And so I went outside. I was quite disoriented by it and by being caught rolling my eyes so much. So I went outside, went for a walk in these woods around. And down below our house, there's a road that goes past a big ledge, and on a granite ledge. And in that ledge are these grinding holes, 5 or 6 grinding holes that could be 1,000 years old or could be 100 years old, of the Kumeyaay people, who the women and some men would sit there and they would grind acorns on the rock. After a while, and they also pound the acorns. After a while, you ended up with these holes in the rock. This kind of place appears all through these mountains.
I'm looking at some now. I'm going to see if I can share. I've never heard of this. And go ahead. Sorry.
So I'm looking at these grinding holes. And as I'm looking at them, I begin to hear women singing. And I admit in the book, now I could be hallucinating, or it could be my imagination, which is necessary to truly see nature, is to use your imagination. And what I was hearing and seeing at that point were Kumeyaay women sitting on that rock, grinding acorns. And then I looked up across the big valley below this rock, and the mountain, Vulcan Mountain, beyond that. And as I looked at the mountain, I saw it go up and down in time. The mountain used to be 10,000 feet tall. It's the oldest range. It's actually a range in San Diego County. Now it's about 5,000 feet tall. But I saw it grow and then shrink. I looked down into the valley and I saw trees grow. I saw fires come through and destroy the forest. I saw the forest regrow. I saw ancient animals, mastodons, come through those trees. And I saw the original people, the first people of this region, walking through the trees. And then I realized I was still hearing the women singing. And And what I thought was, how in the world can a computer give you that? How in the world can you have that kind of experience? And I admit my imagination was, or I was hallucinating or something, but so many of us who spend a lot of time in nature have those moments in which we transcend ourselves and whatever the society is going through.
Yeah.
And that's part of it's part of what William Blake talked about, stepping back and seeing it in a much larger context.
Even if you don't have that type of experience, I feel like every time, I mean, people, this has almost become cliche now and memes and so on, but I'm fine with it. When you are anxious and stressed, depressed, suffering with anything from grief to disappointment, anything, and you go out into nature, we've all talked about this in many different ways, you gain a different perspective, and often it is just very rejuvenating. And I guess the way I always say it, like a lot of people do, it's just you realize how infinite the universe is, and sometimes some of your problems, at least in my case, they don't always obviously go away out there, but sometimes I think I will chuckle at myself as I'm looking at the hawk's nest and thinking about, I really did the other day, how hard that was to build. I didn't look it up later. I was like, just thinking about when you start, or any bird, just that first whatever twig or whatever they're using now, probably a Snapple can. Regardless, they're smart. And thinking about how hard that must have been to build the nest, and what if like it gets blown away, and I'm frustrated I dropped a screw. I mean, or I'm frustrated that any number of disappointments. So that's my way of describing my own experience. Being you get out in nature, you realize some of your problems that you've blown up are silly. And that happens to me almost every day. I get out almost every day. So how would you say that same thing? Because we all have a way of saying it. And there's research on it as well. But how do you talk about that? And then I'll let you go, I promise.
There's something called panpsychism that is growing as a concept, even in science. Science is taking all of this more seriously. Science is taking indigenous wisdom far more seriously than they did even 10 years ago. This isn't news to an awful lot of people who have been here.
Panpsychism is the philosophical view that consciousness, mind, or experience is a fundamental, ubiquitous feature of the physical universe. Michael Pollan's got a new book about consciousness. Seems like nobody knows what they're talking about.
Well, he does.
No, but I mean, even in his book, like he talks about how people have been exploring this forever. And as you said, it's changing because it would seem that we're relearning what ancient peoples knew. I'm trying to paraphrase what you just said, but that.
People have studied spiders and spider webs. And most of us think about the spider web as just something to catch bugs. But the recent science suggests that that web is an extension of the spider's nervous system. It's right. Part of its consciousness. And we have, in a sense, a kind of web around us. A web of noticing, if we notice. So, my way of looking at that is there's much more to life than we know. And but at the same time, as you said earlier, our despair is growing because of climate change. And there's a new report out that dismisses some of the extreme worries about climate change, and that's being debated. But even moderate climate change is going to change our lives,
or has already destroyed people's homes and communities over and over. It is currently happening, and the debate about how is more than fair debate about how extreme it's going to be. But there's no debate about the science.
One of the things is, and I write about what I call the need for a new transcendentalism. And I know I'm using big words here like mayonnaise.
I look them up. They can look up big words. I appreciate it.
Yeah. And let me shift. And, this new transcendentalism, I think that probably Thoreau thought that he was going to escape industrialization by going to Walden Pond and separating himself.
Right.
And it was probably possible then. You know, I thought that I would escape some of the worry about climate and environmental destruction by moving up here. I did, but it's a longer story. But in the beginning, no, it was worse because I saw all these oak trees dying as a certain insect is moving through the oak forest here. And you see these great elephant graveyards of old ancient oaks that die faster and faster up here. So not escaping climate change. It's all around us. There's a guy, and I mentioned this earlier, I wanted to tell you about near the end of the book, and he's actually the president of the San Diego School Board, but he grew up here in these mountains. His parents owned part of Vulcan Mountain, and he spent a lot of his childhood up here. And this mountain was burned. In 2003, a fire came through, actually several years. It came through and destroyed the forest, much of it. Now, much of it has grown back up, and a lot of it the fire missed. But for years, he's been coming up to the mountain and planting trees. And he doesn't tell a lot of people about it. He brings up seedlings, pine seedlings, and I went up to the mountain once with him when he was doing that. And he told me how he had planted hundreds and hundreds of trees over many years, trying to give back more forest to that mountain. And then one day he was in his truck at the base of the mountain, and he began to sob. He doubled over his steering wheel and just sobbed. And the reason was, the obvious suddenly occurred to him that another fire was going to come. And it would take out all of the years of his work and take out the forest again on that mountain, with or without climate change. It was more likely with climate change. But then he realized over time what other people told me also that I interviewed in the book, that his work in the forest to bring more trees to it, to plant it again, and to watch those trees grow, that for the few years that they were there, life would be better. It would be better for the people who experienced that mountain, but it would also be better for the animals that live on that mountain.
And everything under the ground.
And that's not nothing.
That's not nothing. Well, you also write this about Cody. Is it Peterson?
Yeah.
You write, I asked Cody what still motivates him. He had difficulty answering that question. Quote, there's this beautiful passage in the New Testament, he said. I'm forgetting what it is right now. But the Apostle Peter says, the whole of the law is one command, to love thy neighbors as thyself. You ask yourself, how is it that the whole of law could be one commandment, to love thy neighbor? These trees, all of these, are your neighbors, I said. Exactly. I'm identified with this system I love. And he goes on. But I thought that was hopeful and great, and just a really deep, thoughtful, philosophical way of looking at who your neighbors are and who you should be advocating for, especially the least amongst us. And I'm trying to think of what nature's parallel is that, but it's probably under our feet because we crushed them, or on the ground. I don't know who's the least amongst us nature-wise, but anything that's endangered for sure. It certainly isn't the weeds that I have growing, but now I'm supposed to respect them too. I hate how things have changed. I used to love my lawn, and I was all just completely conditioned by American capitalism and Scott's lawn seed, and I thought that my self-worth was dependent upon my lawn. There's some truth in that, obviously, but it is an insidious belief that we have gotten to and forgotten or never knew how important everything else is, apparently. Just as important as you, apparently. even Richard Louv, who's taught us to appreciate all these things, is apparently not more important than Cody's trees, than the mountain lions that you've been tracking for years?
Yeah, there's a sense of awe.
What have they done? 11 books, sir. An amazing nonprofit.
All I have to do is, my wife got up one morning, and it was 5 a.m, and she looks out her office window, and she sees a big mountain lion coming up our walk. It has a small animal in its mouth. And it goes up as slowly. She said it was kind of a grand walk, that it walked up and then to the road and then went away. People live up here 30 years without ever seeing a mountain lion. But as one ranger up here likes to remind people, you've all been seen by mountain lion. You've all been watched. And that awe, that sense of wonder that she felt watching that.
Yeah.
And I have camera traps around the house, and webcams, and I moved one to that area. And the next morning I got up and there was that mountain lion. And it's a great picture, and you can just see its muscles moving as it walks down into the yard. And I showed it to a friend, and she says, that looks like a freight train, just the way it moved in all of its parts. I finally saw one for myself on Vulcan Mountain. It jumped in front of my car and then ran along in front of me, in front of the right bumper, and then leaped up into the bushes and then disappeared up the mountain.
Oh, wow.
And, again, it's kind of like looking at the valley and the mountain and seeing it change in time. How do you replicate that on a computer screen?
You don't.
And again, I like computer screens, but how do you replicate that? That sense of awe and wonder. As a kid, I would have given anything just to see a bobcat and in the woods behind our house, which is where I first experienced noticing, and what I've called in this book bioenchantment. When we open ourselves up to all of the complexity of the forest or the desert or the urban park around us, we're enriched in ways that are hard to describe. And now science is looking at that. And what do we do when we sense things we don't understand around us? Life that is there but isn't there. We anthropomorphize it. We turn it into elves and leprechauns in our mind, and fairy circles. What I've learned doing this book is that they exist. But they exist in nature, and they exist not in human form. And that is the bioenchantment that we're capable of experiencing.
Indeed. Well, you've done it again. Noticing intimate encounters with the natural world, and I am so grateful to talk to you. I hope we can do part 2, 3, and 4 and talk about all the other things that are happening in the world as we used to, but I hope everybody goes and gets this book, and I hope everybody goes and gets outside and notices and gets vitamin N and sends us pictures, because I can never have enough. Thank you, Richard Louv. Congratulations.
Thanks, Pete.
Well, how about that? We did it. Been preparing for that one for a while, been anticipating it for a while, noticing intimate encounters with the natural world. I hope you like something different here on a Thursday to listen to. I'm sure you're going to go back and listen to all your favorite news and political podcasts, but I hope you'll take something good away from that conversation. And I will see you tonight at the Hangout at 8 p.m. Thank you very much for being here, for being you. And a special treat for you bumblebees here at the end. I'll introduce it at the beginning of some other show. I found this Instagram account, this woman, the.motherless.voice, a British woman, maybe her 50s or older, I don't know. And she describes her account as using somatic sound, vocal healing, and breath. Reclaim your voice and shift your patterns. Anyway, I liked it. I like what she had to say here. She looks right into the camera. It's fun. And I'm going to steal everything she says and use it in my life and share it with you. Here she is, the motherless voice.
You are going to make it, but please sleep well, drink more water, breathe. And stop being so fucking hard on yourself.
When the tyrants taunt you in the siren's teeth, you better stand up, stand up. Let the brave meet the challenge, let the weak flee. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up, you got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. Point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. See the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right. We got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it than now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.